Toward last light, the clouds turned red and the west wind blew more and more strongly. Kaya smelled the scent of rain in the wind. She heard small birds sing the high, whistling notes that meant a storm was on the way. By dark it would be raining hard, and everyone would stay inside the teepees with the door flaps closed. The storm would give her and Two Hawks a chance to escape. When she saw lightning spike down from the clouds, she went to find him. He was banking the fire with ashes. She caught his eye and signaled to him, "Go! Tonight! Meet at the big tree!" Soon rain lashed the teepees and thunder shook the earth. The dogs huddled down with their heads buried in their tails. Everyone, except for a lone guard, gathered inside. Otter Woman tied Kaya's leg to hers and settled down under several hides to sleep out the storm. Kaya waited until she was certain everyone slept soundly. Then she whispered in Speaking Rain's ear, "The knife, in the pack beside the door." Kaya felt Speaking Rain slowly inching herself away from their sleeping place. If she made any sounds, the wail of the storm covered them. After what seemed like a long time, Kaya felt Speaking Rain's hand on hers, then the knife in her palm. Gently, Kaya began to work the knife against the rawhide thong. There, she'd cut it. She forced herself to lie still a while longer to be sure Otter Woman hadn't felt anything. At last, Kaya eased herself away. To deceive Otter Woman if she woke, Speaking Rain took Kaya's place beside her. Quickly, quietly, Kaya dressed, slid the knife into her bag, and folded up a sleeping hide. She put the little bag of food they'd saved into her bundle, too. Then her courage almost failed her. How could she leave her sister? She clasped Speaking Rain's hand. Speaking Rain squeezed back. Their touch was a vow that they'd be together again. Kaya dragged herself on her stomach under the edge of the teepee until she was outside in the howling storm. The camp was shrouded in darkness, and the rain blew sideways. Kaya didn't see the guard. Maybe he was checking on the horses. She crept, keeping low to the ground, until she left the teepees behind. Then she began to run as she had never run before. She sped, wet sagebrush stinging her legs, until she made out the big cottonwood towering over the woods. Was Two Hawks there? Had he been able to escape too? As Kaya skidded down the slope toward the big tree, she slipped. She was on her hands and knees when she heard Two Hawks call softly from the bushes. Kaya? Never had her name been more welcome to her. She didn't see the boy until he was right in front of her. In a flash of lightning, she saw that he carried a bundle and wore leggings he must have stolen from a raider. He beckoned for Kaya to follow, then started running across the open plain. They ran westward into the wind. They had to cover as much ground as they could. As soon as it was light, the raiders would discover that their captives had run off. They'd follow swiftly on horseback. Kaya and Two Hawks must be well away and hidden by then. All night they ran through lashing rain, but before first light the storm had passed over. Behind them the gray sky shimmered like an abalone shell. They ran along a rocky outcropping until they found a shallow opening beneath an overhang. Two Hawks dragged tumbleweeds over their tracks to cover their trail. Then they spread a hide under the rocky shelf, lay down on it, and covered themselves with the other hide. Two Hawks pulled a tumbleweed into the opening to shield them. Kaya thought she was too frightened to sleep, but in only a moment she fell into a black slumber. A hand pressed over her mouth woke her. Who held her down? A raider? Then she realized it was Two Hawks signaling her not to speak or move. She heard distant hoofbeats, then the sound of horses running not far from where they lay. Scouts had followed them. Scarcely breathing, she pressed herself against the earth. The hoofbeats became fainter and disappeared. Kaya and Two Hawks had hidden themselves well. But would the scouts find them on their return? The boy must be thinking the same thing. "Stay still," he signaled her. All day they lay under the hedge. Slowly the light faded and night returned. The enemy scouts hadn't come back. Perhaps they'd given up their search, but there was no way to know. Kaya and the boy would have to be on the lookout every moment so they could see without being seen. At last Two Hawks signaled to her, "Let's have a look around." They crept out of their hiding place like prairie dogs out of a burrow. They ate some of their dried meat and sipped rainwater from a hollow in a stone. Then they made their way to the top of a low ridge and paused there to get their bearings. The moon seemed to float up out of the dark lake of waving prairie grasses. The stars were low and bright. Kaya had been told many stories about the stars to help her find her way. She gazed up at the vast star map shining above them. She saw the group of stars called the Seven Duck Sisters, but she concentrated on the star that never moves, the North Star, called Elder Brother. With Elder Brother as a guide, she calculated the way west. "Follow me," she signaled to Two Hawks. He shook his head. Again she motioned for him to follow her, but he stayed put. "Does he think I can't read the stars?" Kaya thought. She stamped impatiently and started walking. Before she'd gone more than a few steps, he came after her. Oh, she hoped she wouldn't lead them astray. If she made a mistake in her directions, they wouldn't be able to find the buffalo trail. All night they walked into the wind, which was rising and getting colder. They were near the foothills now, but they would never be able to discover the buffalo trail in the dark. They would have to chance moving by day if they were to find it. But first they must rest for a while. When the morning star appeared, Kaya signaled to Two Hawks. "We need a lean-to for shelter." Enemy scouts might still be looking for them, so Kaya chose a spot hidden deep in a thicket. With the knife she cut several branches from a pine and leaned them together to make a frame. Then she cut an armful of thick, short branches. "Help me," she signed to Two Hawks. His lips turned down and his eyes were slits. "Building a shelter is the work of women," he signed. "I won't do the work of women any more." "Don't you want to get warm?" Kaya signed. "Come on, help me." "You works," Two Hawks signed. "I'll keep a lookout." He turned his back on her. Kaya wove branches into the frame until the shelter was completed. She crawled inside with Two Hawks right behind her. There was room enough for them to sit upright and eat the last few bites of their food. Kaya chewed slowly. Her belly ached with hunger, and her legs shook with fatigue. As they wrapped up in their hides, her mind was filled with worries. Would they manage to find the trail again? Could they cross the mountains before snow blocked the pass? In spite of her exhaustion, sleep was a long time coming. Kaya woke to full sun and the sound of geese. When she crawled out of the lean-to, the last grasshoppers of the season sprang up around her. Two Hawks stood grimly gazing up at the flock of geese flying south. Did he know their flight meant snow could be on the way? Hunger made Kaya dizzy. Surely Two Hawks was hungry too. She pointed to the dark mass of the foothills ahead. She knew there would be fish in the streams running through the hills. "Let's get some fish," she signed. "Follow me." Two Hawks glowered at her. "Men lead and women follow. You follow me." Kaya huffed in exasperation. But she decided not to fight with him. Maybe he wouldn't be so disagreeable after they got something to eat. Soon they were deep in the foothills. Kaya kept looking back, but she saw no signs of enemy scouts. Perhaps they were already on their way to their own country in the east. Before her, the Bitterroot Mountains seemed to reach up to the sky. Snow already lay on the highest ridges. Kaya clutched her hide around her shoulders and shivered. She and Two Hawks didn't have much time, but she was so tired and hungry that her legs wobbled. She needed food and water, and she needed rest. "We must stop here," she signed. Two Hawks frowned. "We must go on." "I can't go on," she signed. He looked at her hard, his jaw set. "We have to go on," he signed. He walked off, as if he didn't care whether she followed or not. If this skinny boy can keep going, then so can I, Kaya thought. She caught up with him, but they made slow progress. The woods were full of windfall trees they had to climb over. Twigs tore at Kaya's face and arms, and often she stumbled and fell. Then she heard the sound of a stream. Was this the stream that led to the buffalo trail? "We'll rest here and fish tomorrow," she signed. Two Hawks turned to her with a sullen expression. "Don't tell me what to do. My father is a warrior. Some day I will be a warrior too." "Right now you're only a boy," she signed, "and I know better than you." "You're not the leader," he signed. "I am. I say we go on." Anger flared in Kaya's chest. It had been her idea to escape. If it hadn't been for her, he'd still be a captive. She was the one who had gotten them this far. She knew they'd never make it home if they didn't guard their strength carefully. I say we build a shelter and rest, she signed. Two Hawks screwed up his face in a scowl. I am not your slave. I am no one's slave any more. I do as I choose. He turned on his heel and started running alongside the stream. In a moment he'd broken through some bushes and disappeared. Kaya was so upset that her heart was beating like a drum. How could this boy be so foolish? Should she let him go on alone, or try to catch up with him again? She knew they'd be safer if they stayed together, whether he thought so or not, and she didn't want to face the night alone. So against her will, she started plodding wearily upstream. Kaya ducked under branches and climbed over rocks. When she smashed her head against a cedar limb, she went to her knees in pain. Let him go on if he wants, she thought. I need to rest. Crawling on her hands and knees, she started to move under the cedar tree to sleep. Her hand touched something warm and furry. What was it? She pushed back the branches and looked. It was the body of a fawn that an animal had killed. She knew that cougars hunted elk and deer in these woods. This was a fresh kill. The cougar that had made the kill must be nearby. Surely it would come back for its meal. But if the cougar came upon a running boy, it might think he was more prey and go after him. Kaya's first thought was to get away from the kill and hide. Let Two Hawks look after himself. Then she thought of the magpie feather in her bag. She'd kept that feather to remind herself that she must think of others before herself. She got to her feet and hurried upstream. Around the bend she saw Two Hawks ahead of her on the pale sandy shore. He was crouching at the edge of the stream, drinking from his cupped hands. When he heard her coming, he glanced her way, and as he did, she saw the flash of a cougar leaping down from an overhanging limb.